There comes a moment, usually quiet and unannounced, when you notice how tired you are. Not the kind of tired sleep can fix, but the deeper kind that settles into the chest after years of pushing, correcting, proving, and adjusting yourself to meet life where you thought it demanded to be met. You may still be functioning, still moving forward in appearance, but inwardly there's a tightness, as if every step requires negotiation. This is often where people believe they need more discipline, more effort, more urgency, but that belief is what's been draining you all along. There is another way to move forward. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't bargain with circumstances. It doesn't exhaust your will by turning every desire into a struggle. It begins with a subtle shift inside, one that feels less like doing and more like standing differently within yourself. You may have noticed that the hardest moments are not always the most demanding on the outside. Sometimes everything looks manageable, yet inside you feel resistance, tension, or a low hum of anxiety. That inner friction is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you've been trying to move life by force rather than by alignment. You've been leaning your weight against the door instead of realizing it was never locked. When you argue with life, even silently, your body listens. Your breath shortens. Your thoughts sharpen into strategies. Your attention narrows. Over time, this becomes exhausting because the nervous system cannot tell the difference between real danger and imagined pressure. It only knows that it is being asked to stay alert, vigilant, ready, and so it never rests. But consider this. What if forward movement didn't require constant alertness? What if progress could happen from a state of inner permission rather than inner pressure? This is not about giving up or becoming passive. It's about allowing your strength to come from steadiness instead of strain. Think of a river. It doesn't rush in panic toward the ocean. It doesn't stop to analyze every rock in its path. It moves because it is aligned with gravity, with its own nature. When it meets resistance, it doesn't fight the obstacle head on. It curves, deepens, widens, or slows, and yet it arrives. In your own life, the calm way forward begins when you stop asking, "How do I force this to work?" and begin sensing, "Where am I already supported?" This question shifts your attention from effort to orientation. It allows you to notice the quiet structures beneath your life that have been holding you all along, your capacity to adapt, your ability to endure, your instinct to keep going even when unsure. Inner calm is not something you manufacture. It's something you uncover when you stop interfering with your own rhythm. Much of the exhaustion you feel is not from what you're doing, but from how tightly you're holding yourself while doing it. The jaw clenched, the shoulders raised, the mind rehearsing outcomes that haven't happened yet. These are habits of defense, learned over time, often unconsciously. As you listen now, see if you can soften just one of those places. Not to fix anything, but to allow space. Let the breath drop a little lower. Let the shoulders settle. Let the mind rest its arguments for a moment. You're not abandoning responsibility. You're stepping out of unnecessary resistance. There's a quiet confidence that emerges when you stop needing immediate proof that you're on the right path. It's the confidence of someone who trusts their inner footing, even when the terrain isn't fully visible. This confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rush to convince others. It simply stands relaxed, grounded, and responsive. When you move from this place, your actions change tone. They become cleaner, simpler. You say no more easily. You say yes without over-explaining. You notice opportunities without chasing them. Life begins to feel less like a debate and more like a conversation. This doesn't mean challenges disappear. It means they stop defining you. Instead of asking every difficulty to justify itself, you let it pass through your awareness like weather. Some days are heavier, some are lighter, but you are no longer measuring your worth by how hard you're trying. There is deep relief in realizing that you don't have to wrestle reality into submission to be effective. Much of what you've been seeking responds better to consistency than intensity, to presence rather than pressure, to a settled inner posture that says, "I'm here, and I can meet what comes without abandoning myself." As this way of being takes root, you may notice something subtle but powerful. Your inner dialogue changes. It becomes less evaluative, less urgent. You stop narrating every move. Silence stretches longer between thoughts, and in that silence, intuition becomes clearer. You begin to sense when to move and when to wait, not because a rule told you to, but because it feels right. This is how personal transformation often unfolds, not as a dramatic overhaul, but as a gradual release of unnecessary tension. You don't become someone new, you return to someone more natural, someone who moves forward without self-opposition. If you've spent years believing that effort equals value, this shift can feel unfamiliar at first. Calm may feel like complacency, ease may feel suspicious, but give yourself time. The body knows when it is no longer under attack. The mind knows when it is no longer being driven. And from that place, creativity, clarity, and direction arise on their own. You are allowed to move forward without exhaustion. You are allowed to trust a quieter strength. You are allowed to let life meet you halfway. As you continue walking this inner path, remember that the calm way is not slower, it's steadier, and steadiness over time carries you farther than force ever could. As the steadiness settles in, something else begins to reveal itself, almost shyly at first. You start to notice how much of your past movement was fueled by urgency rather than clarity. Urgency has allowed energy. It demands answers now. It treats uncertainty like a threat, and for a long time it may have seemed useful, even necessary. Urgency can get things started, but it cannot sustain peace. What replaces urgency is not indifference, it's a quieter form of engagement. You begin to sense that you don't need to rush toward the future to be safe within it. The future isn't an enemy waiting to test you. It's an unfolding that responds to how you are standing now. There's often a subtle fear that if you relax too much, everything will fall apart, that if you stop gripping life tightly, you'll lose control. But control was never what kept you afloat. What kept you afloat was adaptability, awareness, and an inner resilience that doesn't depend on constant tension. You didn't survive by force alone. You survived because something in you knew how to bend without breaking. As this realization deepens, the mind slowly releases its habit of scanning for problems. You still see clearly. You're not avoiding reality, but you're no longer hunting for evidence that something is wrong. And this changes how the world meets you. People respond differently, situations feel less confrontational, even silence starts to feel supportive rather than empty. You may notice that decisions feel simpler, not easier in the sense that everything is obvious, but simpler because they're no longer cluttered with self-doubt. You're not asking every choice to guarantee your worth or secure your future. You're listening for resonance instead, for that subtle inner yes or no that doesn't shout but doesn't waver either. This is where quiet confidence begins to root itself more deeply. It's not confidence built on past wins or future promises. It's confidence grounded in self-trust. The trust that you can respond intelligently to whatever arises, even if you don't have a full map, especially if you don't have a full map. When effort loosens its grip, attention sharpens naturally. You begin to notice details you once overlooked because you were too busy trying to get somewhere else. A conversation lands more deeply. A moment of stillness feels nourishing rather than awkward. You realize that presence itself is a form of progress. There's also a gentler relationship with mistakes. They stop feeling like personal failures and start feeling like information, signals, adjustments. You don't spiral as long. You don't punish yourself for being human. You learn, you recalibrate, and you continue without the added weight of self-judgment. This inner shift doesn't isolate you from ambition or desire, it refines them. What you want becomes less about proving something and more about expressing something true. You stop chasing outcomes that looked good on paper but felt hollow in practice. You begin to honor what actually sustains you. Sometimes, this phase brings a sense of emptiness, not the painful kind, but a quiet spaciousness where old motivations no longer fit and new ones haven't fully formed. This is not a void to fear. It's a pause between breaths, a recalibration, life reorganizing itself around a calmer center. In this space, patience grows naturally, not forced patience, but the kind that comes from understanding timing. You sense that not everything is meant to move at once, that some things need incubation, and instead of pushing, you allow ideas, relationships, and directions to mature at their own pace. Your inner dialogue becomes kinder, but also more honest. You stop telling yourself stories just to feel better. You allow truth to be simple. This matters to me. This doesn't anymore. I don't know yet. These statements carry strength when they're not rushed toward resolution. As you live from this steadier place, you may find that life starts offering subtle confirmations, Not dramatic signs, but small alignments. A conversation that opens a door, a delay that protects you, a quiet sense of rightness after making a choice that once would have scared you. You begin to understand that transformation is not about becoming extraordinary, it's about becoming congruent. When your inner state and outer actions stop fighting each other, energy returns. Not in bursts, but in a steady flow. You feel more like yourself, even as you change. And perhaps the most surprising realization is this: you were never behind. You were learning how to move without self-opposition, how to carry yourself without inner conflict, how to let strength be soft without becoming weak. As this chapter of your inner journey continues, allow yourself to rest in this understanding. You are not late, you are not broken. You are not required to strain to be worthy of forward movement. There is a deeper intelligence at work, one that responds to calm, clarity, and quiet conviction. When you stand in that, life doesn't need to be forced, it meets you. And together, you move without argument, without exhaustion, and without leaving yourself behind. And as you keep moving from this place, something even subtler begins to happen. You stop measuring your days by how much you manage to push through. You stop ending the evening with a quiet verdict on yourself. Instead, there's a softer awareness of how you were with life that day, how you met it, how you carried yourself inside it. You begin to sense that your inner state is not a reaction to circumstances, but the ground from which circumstances take their shape, not in a dramatic or mystical way, but in a very human one. When you are inwardly settled, you notice more options. You hear what people are actually saying. You respond instead of react. And this alone changes outcomes more than effort ever did. There's a relief that comes when you realize you don't need to stay tense to stay effective. Tension once felt like responsibility, like proof that you cared, but caring doesn't require strain. In fact, strain often blocks the very intelligence it's trying to protect. You may notice that the body responds first to this shift. Sleep becomes deeper, breathing becomes fuller, the constant low-level vigilance fades. This is not because life suddenly became easier, but because you stopped treating every moment like a test of survival. With that easing, memory loosens its grip. Old regrets don't pull as hard, old fears don't speak as loudly. They may still visit, but they don't stay long. You no longer invite them to define the present. There's a growing sense that you are not here to overpower life, but to cooperate with it. And cooperation does not mean surrendering your desires. It means allowing them to arise from clarity instead of restlessness. You might notice now that you don't rush to explain yourself. Silence becomes more comfortable. You don't feel the same need to justify your pace, your choices, or your pauses. Something in you knows that stillness is not absence, it's preparation. And preparation, when it comes from calm, is invisible from the outside. Others may not notice the internal realignment taking place, but you do. You feel it in the way decisions land, in the way you sense timing, in the way you trust yourself to wait without anxiety. This trust doesn't come from certainty. It comes from familiarity with your own inner ground. You've spent enough time listening to it now to recognize its tone. It doesn't shout, it doesn't panic, it doesn't beg, it simply knows. As you continue forward, you may find that some old ambitions quietly fall away, not because you failed, but because they no longer match who you're becoming. This can feel disorienting at first. Identity often clings to goals long after they've stopped nourishing us. Letting them go isn't loss, it's space-making, and in that space, something truer begins to form, something that feels less like pressure and more like direction. You may also notice that relationships shift. Some deepen, some loosen. This isn't something you need to manage. It's a natural response to inner congruence. When you stop forcing yourself, you stop forcing connections too. There is a dignity in this phase of the journey, a quiet self-respect. You are no longer bargaining with life for permission to be at ease. You are allowing ease to be your starting point. From here, movement feels different. It's not fueled by fear of falling behind. It's guided by a sense of rightness that doesn't need immediate validation. You act, then rest. You rest, then act. and both feel equally legitimate. This rhythm is what sustains real change. Not dramatic surges, but a steady return to center, over and over again. Even when you drift, you know how to come back. And perhaps that's the deepest shift of all. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to arrive. You see yourself as someone already in motion, already held, already capable of meeting what unfolds. So as you sit with this moment, let it be enough. Not as an ending, but as a foundation. The calm way forward doesn't rush you onward. It stabilizes you where you are, so that when the next step comes, it feels natural to take it. And it will come, not because you forced it, but because you were ready to meet it whole, grounded, and no longer arguing with life.